12:09 on San Antonio's News Talk Station 550 KTSA. The candidates have just entered the studio. They are here. They are ready to go. Gentlemen, pull on your headphones. Welcome to News Talk 550 KTSA. Republican candidates Kiko Canseco and Will Hurd, both here for the balance of this hour. We're going to talk with them. They're going to debate each other. We're going to take your phone calls. You can dial in anytime. I would do it early if I were you at 599-5555. Kiko Canseco is an attorney and businessman. He is in, I think, is this right, your third run for...
Well, it's actually the second run for the 23rd Congressional District.
Third overall, though,
Third
right?
overall. I ran in the 28th in 04.
And there was all that redistricting.
Yeah.
So a familiar candidate for people in that district. Will Hurd is making his first ever run for public office. Both of them the top two vote-getters in the primary last month. Separated by just a handful of votes, they were. Now, in just a matter of days, the runoff will determine which of the two goes on to face Ciro Rodriguez in the fall. Will Hurd, good afternoon to you. Welcome to you as well. This is a very crucial runoff because you are going to face, one of you is going to face, an incumbent who is considered one of the most vulnerable in the country, one of the most vulnerable certainly in Texas, a man who voted for health care and said that his constituents, despite the polls, want this, that this is popular in his district. So before we get into your specifics, I want to ask each of you, and we'll alternate who gets to answer these questions first, but I want to ask each of you, why specifically you think in that district his health care vote was the wrong vote. Will Hurd, we'll go first with you.
His vote was the wrong vote. And first, Jack, thanks for having us on the show and letting us talk to your listeners. It was a wrong vote because the people of the 23rd District are against it. You know, Ciro Rodriguez has gone on record and even said that it was his opinion that most of the people were against the health care bill as they were written and ultimately passed. So the folks were against it. And this is going to just add additional mandates on small businesses. It's going to affect jobs. It's going to increase costs of the system. And it doesn't actually do that much to help those that need health care.
Same question for you, Kiko Canseco. I mean, people have looked at that district and said, look, that's going to you've got a lot of uninsured in that district. It's going to extend insurance to them. Why is this a bad vote for Ciro Rodriguez in that district?
Well, first of all, I think more than anything else, the important thing for the district is jobs. And this bill is going to crush the opportunities for jobs and job creation. It's going to crush businesses to the tune of $570 billion in new taxes. We already are hearing that AT&T and Caterpillar and other companies are saying that it's going to take an enormous hit to their bottom line. This is not the correct way to solve whatever ails the healthcare and health insurance industry in our country, and the ability to get healthcare and health insurance, especially in a district where we need jobs and we need health insurance and health care. It is not the proper way to go.
All right, the two Republicans running in Congressional District 23, which is one of the largest districts in the country. They're both here right now on News Talk 550 KTSA, a district that runs from San Antonio all the way down to and encompasses most of the Texas-Mexico border. It is a majority Hispanic district, 55% Hispanic in the 2000 census, 41% Anglo. It's about 650,000 or so people, and one of these two, in a matter of days, will be the Republican running against Ciro Rodriguez in the fall. You can ask them any question you want at 599-5555 or 800-299-KTSA. Let me ask you both about more about this healthcare process, this healthcare vote process, because what we saw was every single Republican voting no, but the Democrats able to whip enough of their votes to get this thing through. We know that deals were made. We know that pork was handed out. We know that people got tons and tons of earmark money in order to, in some cases, switch their vote and get this thing through. Incredible amounts of loyalty to the Democratic leadership were shown because it's the majority leadership. How would you define your independence from the Republican leadership if in the fall we elect a Republican majority Congress? And Kiko Canseco, the question first to you. Are you a maverick who would buck your leadership, and on what issues would you buck it?
I would buck it on anything that goes over the line on spending. Anything that is an earmark, anything that is not budgeted, that's not discussed on the floor of the Congress, that it's not debated on the floor of the Congress. I think that first and foremost, I am a representative of the people based on my convictions, on my values, on what I've always lived my life, and how I've always lived my life. And I am not going to go where my party wants me to go simply because they're pushing me and pushing the party line. I believe that first and foremost, I represent my district and I represent Texas and not the Republican Party.
All right, Will Hurd, same question to you. Are there issues you can envision where you might buck the Republican leadership?
You know, having gone through the entire district, like you said, it's huge, 20 counties, 600 miles across. One of the things that people are worried about is that they feel like the American dream is under attack, that their children or their children's children won't be able to achieve the American dream. And it is under attack. It's under attack by elected leaders that put the interests of the party over the interests of the individuals. And this was a perfect example of what we saw on this past 2 weekends ago, I guess now. And yes, you know, I've gotten to where I am today because of the people of this district. The people of this district have spoken, and they are my boss. They're the people that I represent, not the party. And I believe there may come times when I will be at odds with what the constituents of my district want and what the party wants. And I, of course, will fight on behalf of the constituents.
599-5555. You can ask a question. We're going to put whatever questions you ask to both candidates, and we're alternating who goes first on the answers. So, Will Hurd, you will answer this next question first, and it comes from Jim on the talk lines. Jim, you're on KTSA with the District 23 candidates. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My question is for Mr. Hurd. Does he feel any modifications need to be made to the Patriot Act? And my other question would be, does he feel, would he endorse or his opinion of favoring legalizing marijuana?
All right. For now, we'll come to the marijuana question later. Let's talk about the Patriot Act. Your main credentials in this race are a career in the CIA,
Yes, sir.
so you must have some pretty strong opinions about the Patriot Act. Would you favor modifying it?
Well, thanks for the question, Jim. And the answer is I've seen how the Patriot Act has helped us stop terrorists in this country. And I've seen how it's an important tool in our toolkit to take the fight to Al-Qaeda and other foreign terrorist organizations. With anything, with that type of power, it comes a lot of great responsibility, and I think the FBI did a recent Inspector General audit talking about how there were ways to streamline the implementation. So, I think the Patriot Act is a very important tool, and I think with most tools, you should always be reviewing them to making sure that we're not overstepping our legal bounds.
But you're saying in general you would not modify it.
Correct.
All right. Kiko Canseco, same question to you.
I have followed Jack, I have followed the course of the Patriot Act since it was enacted back in 2001, and I know that it has served us very well in avoiding other 9/11s and other terrorist acts on the people of the United States. I think that there are certain intrusive functions of the Patriot Act, and we must be very, very mindful of it, especially in areas where it allows the government to, without any warrant, go into our bank accounts and go into our private phone calls and monitoring other things that I think need to be protected, like the FISA court goes in there and protects that certain elements of due process and warrants are allowed. By and large, it's a good act. I think that it requires some tweaking in some of these areas, the financial services area, and also in the area of of monitoring phone calls. But other than that, I think it's a good act.
All right, we're going to come back and cover more of the health care issue. We're going to talk about veterans benefits, the pro-life question, term limits, and anything you want to ask these two candidates, Will Hurd and Kiko Canseco, both here, both vying to be the Republican opponent in the fall for Ciro Rodriguez. And we continue on News Talk 550 KTSA. We are playing politics in Congressional District 23. Less than 2 weeks from now, a runoff will determine which Republican faces Ciro Rodriguez in the fall. These two gentlemen are the top two vote getters from last month's primary. Kiko Canseco, a businessman and attorney, Will Hurd, a former CIA agent, and both of them in this runoff for the chance to take on someone who's widely regarded as a vulnerable Democratic incumbent in the fall, Congressman Ciro Rodriguez. You can ask the questions at 599-5555, and we're going to start this next round of questions with Kiko Canseco. Now, Politico.com reported this week that the Republican National Committee is backing off a little bit on the replace and repeal message on health care because they're afraid that in some parts of the country that may not be the right message for Republican candidates. So let me ask you, I know both of you opposed the health care reform that passed. Kiko Canseco, what is the best way to dismantle it? Is it in the courts? Is it a repeal mechanism in Congress? Are you thinking that, as John Boehner is, that it's going to be mainly a question of not funding it? How do you go about stopping Obamacare?
You know, I'm a big believer in repeal, replace, and reform, notwithstanding what the NRCC has said. I think that what we have is a very bad bill that does present some nice candy in there, but I think it's outweighed by all of the heavy burdens and intrusions that this bill presents to the American public, and it's very un-American in my opinion. So I am still for repeal, replace, and reform, and that's where I will stand. I think that the best avenue is, number one, make sure that we return a Republican Congress to Washington, D.C., and that way we stop the funding of it. And that would be the first and more successful route. Mm-hmm. I encourage as many states as possible to get involved in the fray of challenging the constitutionality of this act on a number of points. But going up the appeals process is going to take some time. It has to go from the district court to the appellate court, and then to see if certiorari is granted by the Supreme Court. That may be long and arduous. I think our best hope at this time is to make sure that in January of 2011, we have a Republican Congress that will stop the spending on this thing cold, as well as other spending mechanisms that have been put in place over the last 12 months.
All right, Will Hurd, same question for you. In your opposition to Obamacare, what's the best way for Republicans to take it on?
I think the answer is all the above to the options you laid out earlier. I think you work towards repeal, you work towards fighting it in the courts, and you work towards making sure you don't fund it. One of the things that I think this is a perfect example of how we have to be cognizant of everything that's going on in other parts of the country, and that we all need to work towards making sure that we have a number of conservative candidates coming to Washington in 2010 in order to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen again, but also in order to do something about it now. So this is all the American people getting together, banding together, and finding candidates across the country that they can do to help.
Isn't it safe to say, though, let me put this to both of you, that even if Republicans do actually seize control of the House, which is a lot of seats, I think it's 40-plus seats, you're not going to have a veto-proof majority. So in essence, aren't we going to have just a situation where you may be able to cast some votes and force the president into vetoing some things or overriding you, but you're not likely to have enough Republicans to actually stop Barack Obama in his tracks? So is that safe to say? Or are you predicting that there'll be so much turnover that you will have a veto-proof majority?
Well, first of all, I'm hoping that we do have enough turnover in order to get a veto-proof majority. But at the same time, we have to remember that some 35, 36 Democrat congressmen voted against this bill. And how many more would have voted against it but for the cajoling and arm twisting and bribing that went on by the Speaker of the House? So I think that the mood of the nation, where the overwhelming majority of the American people did not want this bill to go through, that there will be an enormous amount of support, notwithstanding that there will be a small Republican majority come January that will be able to stop this thing cold and hopefully reverse it again in 2012.
Will Hurd, do you agree that there will be enough willing Democrats to work with a Republican majority?
Absolutely, because the mood of the country is going to be completely different after the elections in 2010, and a lot of folks are going to see how disastrous this is going to be on the Democratic Party, and so folks are going to be more willing to work together on excising specific areas that are exceptionally bad and building upon others.
All right, let's get another question in here for the candidates at 599-5555, and we'll start this round with Will Hurd. And Marie, you get the question on KTSA.
Thank you. My question, Mr. Hurd, is you claim to be pro-life, but you won't fill out the pro-life surveys, and you are endorsed by a board member of Planned Parenthood. So how can you claim to be pro-life if your friends are members of Planned Parenthood and you won't fill out the surveys?
Okay.
Marie, thanks for the question. I'm pro-life. I don't know how many more ways to say it. I've said it in a number of forums. I've said it on the website as well too. Yes, there are individuals that have supported me despite a disagreement on something as important as this issue, but despite this disagreement, they believe that I'm the best person for the job. So I'm not ashamed of that. But again,
what is this survey, and why won't you fill it
out?
Well,
I don't know which survey they're speaking at.
Okay.
We get a number of surveys. There's not a question that I haven't answered, on my website, in person. So again, which specific surveys they are, I do not know. But again, my issue is clear on this. I'm from Texas. I say what I mean what I say, and I've been pretty clear on this topic.
All right. Kiko Canseco, are you more pro-life than your opponent, Will Hurd?
Well, let me tell you, that's like saying, are you more pregnant or less pregnant? But I will say this, Jack, that I have since day one filled out every survey that comes across my desk. And I believe the voters deserve to see where I stand when I sign my name to an issue. And my opponent has simply not done that. I not only filled out every pro-life and value survey, I have been endorsed by Texas Right to Life, Texas Alliance for Life, Concerned Women for America, Texas Homeschool Coalition, Young Conservatives of Texas. Since day one, I signed the Americans for Tax Reform, No New Tax Pledge, Americans for Prosperity, No Climate Tax Pledge, and the day Obamacare passed, I signed the Repeal It Pledge. Not until yesterday, after criticism from the San Antonio Express News and polling, did my opponent jump onto the bandwagon and sign the Repeal It, and ATR pledges. I have always stood on my principles since day one. You can count on me not wavering on the facts and constantly shifting political winds like my opponent has.
Jack, if I could respond to that, my stances on issues are very clear, and they've always been the same. One of the things that the reason that number of folks have come to our bandwagon is because they believe in the message that we're touting. My friend and opponent here has lost 4 elections, and part of that is, we never know which person shows up. Even he changes his name sometimes. Is it Kiko or is it Francisco? I think he's getting some bad advice. Back in 2004, he was supportive of a number of initiatives in the Department of Education. Now he's saying the Department of Education should go away. He supported bailouts in 2008 and said, as a banker, these were things that were good for the country. So I never know which person is going to show up, and his record has been a little different depending on which race he's running in. But my stance on the issues are very clear, and you can go to the website, and it articulates all of our
Let me
policy
ask a
positions.
question about bailouts. Speaking of that, I think this will give you, Kiko Canseco, a chance to respond, and I want to start this round with you. There's a story in the news this morning about the city council considering bailing out a museum. I mean, this is the state of affairs in this country. We've gone from bailing out supposedly vital financial institutions. Still, the jury is out on whether we should have done that. Then we bailed out the automakers, who suddenly appear to be very robust. And now we're going to bail out a museum. the taxpayers are furious with this whole idea that anything is too big to fail. So now that we've had some time to judge both the financial and automotive bailouts, what is your position on that, and how would you have voted if you had been in Congress back then?
I would have voted against the bailouts simply because government has no business being a banker to private industry. And secondly, no business is too big to fail. We all know that when businesses fail, there's always somebody there that's going to pick up the pieces and pick up the slack. There's always some other competitor that will pick up that business. American way is not for government to get in the way of business. It's for government to make sure that businesses have a clear opportunity to flourish, to grow jobs, and to compete. If they fail, they can fall on the ground, dust themselves off, move on. If they fail and there are other people that can compete, pick up the pieces and start anew somewhere else. That's the American way.
All right, same question for you, Will Hurd. You're in Congress in the fall of '08 when this bailout mania starts. Your Republican president, your Republican Treasury Secretary, your Republican leadership is telling you we have to have this. The country is on the edge of an abyss. How would you have voted?
I would have voted against the bailouts. The government should not be the one deciding, picking winners and losers. And this is exactly what they did. This is, we've seen this history. Look at Japan, look at the United States in the 30s and 40s, where government bailouts actually leads to further economic calamities. And so I would have voted against it. I'm against a big government. I'm running in order to fight back of an over-encroaching government that's trying to dictate winners and losers in the energy field. It's trying to dictate what type of health care you're supposed to get. These things are wrong, and this is not what the government should be doing. And we need to get back to the fundamentals of the Constitution.
All right, 12:33 on KTSA. We're talking to the two District 23 Republicans. They'll be in a runoff April 13th, I think that is, and one of them will go on to face Ciro Rodriguez in the fall. Next round of questions starts with Will Hurd, and the question comes from Reggie at 599-5555. Reggie, go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, good afternoon, gentlemen. I have a very simple question with regard to the differences between Social Security and veterans benefits. If a person has a problem with the Social Security office, obviously they can hire an attorney, and that attorney takes part of the settlement as his pay. The same is not true for veterans. We have to hire our own attorneys at our own expense, and we have a limited time to address this. I'd like to have your comments on that.
We'll heard you first.
Reggie, I appreciate the question, and I've heard this come up a number of times from folks. This isn't right. We should be honoring the sacrifices that you and your fellow men have done for this country, and making you go out of pocket to get your basic benefits is unacceptable, and that needs to be changed. And this is again a common concern that I've heard from a number of different folks, and it needs to be stopped. And making sure that Veterans Affairs is being responsive to the needs of the people they're supposed to meet.
All right, that was Will Hurd. Same question for Kiko Canseco, basically asking if there can be the same streamlining of the process for veterans contesting their benefits as for Social Security recipients. What's your answer to that?
Well, Reggie, thank you very much for your question. Let me tell you that unlike Social Security, veterans and their benefits were paid for by a blank check. Military men and women go out there and give the government a blank check saying, take my life, my limbs, my fingers, my hands, my face even, if you have to, but here it is. And I think that there is no response back from the federal government, especially when it starts failing on the promises that it makes to all of our veterans. I think that's patently unfair, and I will always fight and be there for benefits for veterans and their families, those men and women that are out in the field, and make sure that they are greeted not just as by a grateful nation, but also that they're taken care of and that promises are fulfilled. With that said, I agree with you. I think that it's unfair for veterans not to have the ability to also pay for a lawyer that is going to go in front of a board and argue for veterans' benefits, just like it is in Social Security cases. And I will work very hard to rectify that problem.
All right, Reggie, thanks for that question. Let's get to another caller and question for both Kiko Canseco and Will Hurd. Juan, you're on News Talk 550 KTSA.
Yes, hello. My question was, what proof do you have that the majority of your districts are against this health care bill? And the other one is, how is this bill un-American?
All right, Kiko Canseco, you go first this time.
First of all, I think that to answer your question, Juan, it is something that many people in this district have voiced to me from all sides of the aisle as I go through the district, whether it's in Eagle Pass or Del Rio or in the farm and ranch communities, people in the South Side that feel that there is a government intrusion into their lives. Yeah, everybody wants to have a type of health insurance that's going to cover pre-existing conditions or that's going to pass on from one place of employment to another. But the question becomes, how can we afford it? And secondly, when you have a federal government panel that's going to be telling the insurance companies what they should cover, what they should charge, and what they shouldn't be doing as far as our health care is concerned, that flies in the face of the free market. And what it does more severely is it destroys jobs. And right now we've got that cloud over our heads of job destruction because of this, and we're already seeing the signs of it with these big corporations that have already announced that they're going to take some huge hits to their bottom line, and this thing hasn't even gone into place. So it is not productive for the people of the 23rd Congressional District and not conducive to living and families and growing businesses and growing jobs in the 23rd Congressional District.
Right.
It is un-American simply because the federal government, it was unintended for the federal government to get so involved in our personal lives.
All right, that's Kiko Canseco. Same question now for Will Hurd. It was a two-parter from one. How do you know the people in the district are against this thing, and what makes it un-American?
Right, nationwide there was, I think it was a Rasmussen poll that shows about 75% of people were against the bills and 65% of people said let's start it all over again. Also, having, the number of interactions that we have over the district, the people that have said they were against this, whether they identify themselves as a Republican, independent, or Democrat. So there's that data as well. And it's un-American, partly the way it was created, the way it came about, the special deals that were made in order to buy somebody's vote. This was against the will of the American people and was crammed down our throats. And where in the Constitution does it say that the federal government can tell individuals that you must enter into a relationship with a private company? So there are a number of things. We need to healthcare in this country does need to be reformed, but it needs to be reformed in such a way where costs go down and access to the system is increased. And these bills that were passed were not did neither of those.
All right, we're back with Republican candidates Will Hurd and Kiko Canseco on News Talk 550 KTSA. We're talking with Republican candidates Kiko Canseco and Will Hurd in a runoff to see who faces Ciro Rodriguez for all the marbles this fall. We're talking about a variety of issues. And let me ask you both, we're going to start this round with Will Hurd, about, obviously, this district encompasses a lot of the border, and right now all the headlines are about all the violence on the Texas-Mexico border, people on both sides of it really in fear of their lives. One of the things driving that are drug dollars and drug crime. What is your position on decriminalizing marijuana, and what is your opinion on the so far failed multi-billion-dollar war on drugs?
I'm completely against the decriminalization of marijuana. I'm clear on that stance. This is the war on drugs, and drugs, what it has done to our our communities is disastrous, and we need to step up our efforts in order going after these drug cartels. I always say that we should treat the drug cartels the way we treat the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and I know a little something about that. There's resources that we use overseas that we can use right here in our own backyard, and we need to start fusing intelligence operations with our local law enforcement operations, and that's kind of an area where there's a big gap. We know where many of these drug cartels leaders are, and the difference between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda is these folks aren't living in caves. We also have an opportunity with the president of Mexico, who's willing to take the fight to them, and we need to continue to support the president in this fight as well too, but making sure that our folks on the border, our local and state officials, have the resources and the intelligence in order to do their jobs.
All right, Kiko Canseco, question on decriminalizing marijuana, and what about the so-called war on drugs?
No, and no on decriminalizing marijuana or any illicit drugs. None of my supporters, none of my endorsers are for that, unlike my opponent, who has one of his endorsers that is for that, decriminalizing marijuana. But I think that what marijuana does is that it ruins our families, it destroys our communities, and it just is not the right way to go. Many things can be done on the border. I know Mexico very well. I've done business at a lot of levels for American companies and American businesses in Mexico, and I know how Mexico operates. Part of the problem is that we've got an enormous amount of corruption in Mexico. But the other side of the problem is that we put our law enforcement agents with their hands tied behind their backs. We give them a lot of rules of engagement that just don't make sense, and as a consequence, we end up putting our enforcers in jail for violating those rules of engagement. Instead of doing the right thing, we need to enforce the laws that are existent on the books, make sure that we stop illegal immigration, make sure that we stop these cartels coming across. We need to make sure that our border sheriffs and police forces are empowered to enforce the immigration laws of the United States and to turn over people to ICE. We also need to make sure that people that come across the border and threaten us on this side need to be chased down and need to be brought to justice in Mexico. And we need to work very, very diligently with the government of Mexico to make sure that they eradicate all of the corruption that exists even at the highest levels of the Mexican government, in the military and in the police forces. Those are the things that we need to do in order to make sure that this problem that bleeds over onto our side stops.
All right.
And Jack, let me, if you don't mind, there's been talk today from my opponent about my supporters and who's endorsed me and things like that. This election is about the candidate's opinion, what the candidate does, what the candidate's actions are, and again, my opinions are very clear. And over the last 2 decades, Kiko, you've given thousands of dollars to Democratic state and federal candidates, some of them who have been pro-choice. And my question is, I doubt that you've agreed with everything that these people are doing, and you're supporting their ideals. These are tired acts of desperation, and this is about what our programs and policies are for the future.
Jack, let me just respond to that. That is patently untrue. My money has always gone to Republican candidates, and that's a fact, and you can look that up in any kind of report where I've given to President Bush. I've given to Republican candidates since 1998, and all Republican candidates. I think that's a misstatement.
Okay. I don't think we're too interested probably in any of this. So let me move on to the next issue. This round will start with Kiko Canseco, and it's a question from Charlie. Charlie, you're on KTSA.
Hi, Jack. I am a firm believer in the fair tax, and I know Senator Rodriguez was very anti-fair tax, and I will not vote for anybody that doesn't actively say they're going to support it. I'd like to know what the candidate's position is on the fair tax, please.
Well, interesting history there, too, because Ciro Rodriguez actually distorted what the fair tax was in the 2008 race. So first, Kiko Canseco, quickly, position on the fair tax.
Well, I am intrigued by Neil Bortz's fair tax propositions. I think that what we need to concentrate more on is making sure that tax rates stay low in order for families and businesses to keep more of their tax dollars, thereby increasing the revenues to the federal government. But I also believe that we need to simplify the tax code because it is too complex, it is too burdensome, and needs to be simplified. I have said time and again that I would look at the fair tax, but I have one simple concern, and that is that the fair tax looks at taxing consumption. And in an economy that we have here in our country, what it would do is that it would burden our economy unreasonably. But I am open to looking at the fair tax.
All right, same question for you, Will Hurd, replacing the income tax with the fair tax.
You know, my position on taxes is pretty simple. They need to be simpler and they need to be lower. And anything that gets us to that direction is something that should be evaluated. You know, our government needs to go to a low tax, low spend model, and that's going to also help increase the amount of revenues that we're getting in. But this is where we should be as a country and where our government should go.
All right, we're going to give each of these candidates now a 30-second closing statement. And again, a reminder that April 13th is the runoff for these two Republicans, who neither of whom reached the 50% threshold last month in the primary. Will Hurd and Kiko Canseco are the two candidates. And in keeping with our alternating who goes first routine, the first 30-second closing statement will be Will Hurd.
You know, I grew up here in San Antonio, went to John Marshall High School, and then on to Texas A&M, and spent the last 9.5 years as a case officer in the CIA. And I was on the back alleys in places like Karachi and Jalalabad, and I took an oath. I took an oath to support and defend that Constitution, and that is something that has no statute of limitations, and it's something that I believe in, and I believe in my country. You know, we are under attack, as I said before, by elected leaders that think government should do more and individuals should do less. Well, it's time to fight back. It's time to take our government back. And I hope I can earn your support, and make sure you go out and vote next week, April 5th through the 9th, early voting, and then 13th is runoff election day.
All right, Will Hurd, thanks for your time today. Kiko Canseco, a closing statement from you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for the opportunity here. My name is Francisco Canseco, Kiko Canseco, and I'm a small businessman, and we need small business sense to fix what's broken in Washington. As a small business owner here in South Texas, we watched our pennies, made cuts when times were difficult, and created job opportunities when times were good. We need more small business owners in Congress. I grew up here in South Texas. I was born in Laredo in a family of 8 children. I'm the son of legal immigrants from Mexico, and I was taught the values of faith, family, freedom, personal integrity, hard work, personal responsibility, and to help our community. I believe in term limits. I'm the only candidate with small business experience, and I am the only proven pro-life candidate. I urge you to vote smart in the April 13th runoff election, and vote early. Thank you very much for your vote and your support.
Thank you both of you gentlemen, and I'm sure we'll be seeing one of you back here again sometime after April 13th. On today's JR poll question, very quickly, we asked our listeners and our online voters who would be the stronger opponent for Ciro Rodriguez in November. Would it be Canseco or would it be Hurd? Online at ktsa.com, 61% of you said it would be Will Hurd. 39% of you said it would be Kiko Canseco. On the phone, 55% Will Hurd and 45% Kiko Canseco. Again, as you heard them say, early voting starts next week, and that's our JR poll for today. We will have another one for you tomorrow morning at 10:07 and a 90-minute Gang of 4 coming up as well on News Talk 550 KTSA.